Hey, how's it going, guys? Welcome back. It's been a minute, actually, pretty intentional. I was actually waiting to see the new Superman movie, and I actually just came from watching the new Superman movie, and we're about to talk about it. But before I do, let me just say, I am a huge Superman fan. I'm a huge DC fan. Those of you that know me know that I'm very partial to DC, even though I do love a lot of these studios, including Marvel. But I grew up a huge DC fan. I grew up a huge Batman fan, Superman fan, Wonder Woman fan. My favorite superhero of all time is always Batman, but I somehow, some way, always gravitated to Superman. I remember watching Christopher Reeves portray Superman in 4 movies. I never seen anything like it. Back when CGI was not really CGI, Christopher Reeves made you believe he was flying. One of the most iconic shots ever. This one right here. This is back in the 70s. Think about that. But he made us fall in love with Superman, even though a lot of people were really fans of the comic book. But once that portrayal of Christopher Reeve's version of Superman was outstanding. And then moving from that to Dean Cain and I think Heather Locklear and Lois and Clark. I loved watching that show in the 90s. It was 4 seasons, but I really liked that adaptation of Superman. We had never really seen that version of Superman, seeing Clark Kent as a mild mannered reporter, seeing him as Superman, and then obviously seeing Lois Lane. And I think that's actually one of my favorite Lois Lanes that I've ever seen in live action. And then moving from that to all the animated shows and animated movies that has kind of spawned over the decades. DC has really done a great job of really showcasing Superman, right? And then we move into the 2000s where we get to see Smallville. And we get to see a new adaptation of Clark Kent. Because all we saw along those years and along those lines was always Superman and Clark Kent as a reporter. We never really got to see Clark Kent, the teenager. We never got to see Clark Kent, the kid. We never really got to really delve deep into his parents and his upbringing and what that actually entails and why he is who he is, why he really identifies way more as a human being than as a superhero. And with Smallville, we got to see that. So it's actually one of the most beloved DC shows ever. And then from that, we got to see Brandon Routh, arguably one of the worst adaptations of Superman. But I also enjoyed certain parts of that movie, especially that iconic scene of him saving that plane. If you haven't seen that scene in Superman Returns where Superman saves that plane, I would implore you, go to YouTube, watch that scene. Is one of the best scenes shot. I guess in my view, it's one of the best shots, one of the best scenes in Superman, period. I don't know how they did it, but it is outstanding. Go watch that scene on YouTube. Moving from that into my favorite Superman of all time in Man of Steel and Henry Cavill. To me, the best adaptation of Superman. I mean, I remember, it's funny because I'd actually become a huge fan of Zack Snyder way before he came into the DCEU or the DC universe, right? And especially watching Dawn of the Dead, watching 300, watching Watchmen, pun intended. After I watched Watchmen, I knew that, especially when we heard he was going to be doing a new Superman, we didn't know where he would take this Superman, because every director figures out, this, because again, the comics, they direct you, right? They give you context. They give you a lot of material to pull from, but every director chooses to go a different way. But when I went to the movie theater and watched Man of Steel, because the trailers were so good, it's funny how we're in a day where the trailers are not that gravitating and they don't really, make you, I need to go watch this movie. This trailer is just, I remember watching the Man of Steel trailers and I was like, I cannot wait to watch this movie. I mean, all of them were a hit, right? And then I went to watch that movie and I remember leaving the movie theater and going back into another movie theater and watching it again. This was back in the day where you could actually do that. You could leave one movie theater without and going to another one without paying, and you didn't really get in trouble. You can't do that anymore, right? But I love that adaptation, a new version of Superman, no trunks, and looked outstanding, and we all fell in love with that story. And I always say there's certain characters, certain actors who were born to play certain characters. It's really hard for me to see anybody else play Iron Man than Robert Downey Jr. I can't really envision anybody doing it right now. Maybe one day we will. It's hard for me to see anybody else playing Wolverine outside of Hugh Jackman. Right now, maybe one day we will. It's really hard to see anybody else playing Superman the way Henry Cavill did. That man was born to play Superman, and he gave us an incredible Superman. And then after that, we got to see Tyler Hoechlin, right? Play Superman in Superman and Lois. And it was arguably one of the coolest Superman shows. Unfortunately, it was only 4 seasons. A huge part of why it went off air was James Gunn taking over the DC universe. And he didn't really want a different version of a Superman playing alongside his own new version of Superman. Even though that show had incredible ratings, especially its final season. But he just didn't. But Tyler Hoechlin really paid homage to Superman, and we got to see Superman. We got to see Superman build a family. It was a different iteration of Superman, but we still loved it, and I loved it, and it's one of my favorite Superman TV shows. And now we come to the new Superman movie that James Gunn directed. Now, when James Gunn took over DC, at first he didn't really let us know what he was going to do. He talked about how he was trying to make this really aligned, or what words did he use? Really connected universe, right? He wanted to connect everything from animation to live action to TV shows to cartoons to video games. He wanted to make this universe that was all connected, meaning if you were an actor who played in live action, you also did it in animation, you also did it in gaming, you understand? So he wanted to really bring this together, which is a tall order. Then we got to hear he was going to be doing Superman. Now, coming out of the DCEU, which we all loved, a lot of us as fans, we were not tired and we were not done with Henry Cavill as Superman. And you saw that at the end of Black Adam, where they brought back Superman, and it created this firestorm, right? It went viral because finally we believed we were going to get Henry Cavill back as Superman. But no, James Gunn decided to do his own version of Superman. And from the trailers and from everything he leaked in the beginning, nothing was as exciting, nothing made me feel that he was actually going to do something good. Again, it's not from a bias of what we came from with Henry Cavill. It was just that whatever he was releasing didn't really look good. And as a matter of fact, a lot of the scenes we saw from trailers, that didn't really have a lot of context. When I just saw the movie, I actually liked those scenes with context, right? So I don't understand why they released certain things in the trailers that looked so bad, made us as fans react a certain way, but when we saw it in the movie, we were like, dude, this is way different, man. You know what I mean? So anyway, so we didn't know what to expect. So I went into this movie not having a lot of expectations, not knowing what was going to happen. I wanted to give it a fair shake, right? Because all through the last year and a half, with everything coming out and all these things being released, from cuts to trailers to whatever, there was just so much. And none of it gave me confidence that this movie was going to be good. But I remember a couple months ago, I just said, you know what, I'm going to take my fan cap, put it on, go see this movie as a fan, pure fan of DC content, of Superman. Give this movie a fair share. And I did. And I went into this movie wanting to like it. I really did. I went into this movie wanting to like it. Because we're going into a new universe. I really wanted to like it. But I didn't. And I'm going to tell you why. But before I do, let's talk about the good things, the things that I actually liked about this movie. Let's start off with David Corenswet's portrayal of Superman. Now, I really had a huge problem with the suit, which I'll talk about. But I loved him as Superman. He does look the part. He feels the part. It's a more vulnerable iteration of Superman. It was different and difficult to see him that vulnerable, that beat up. He was beat up. I mean, it starts with him. I mean, this movie was like action from start to finish. He's getting his ass kicked the entire movie. And it's difficult to see that. It's hard after everything we've seen, after everything we know of Superman. It's really difficult. And again, James Gunn he'll have to tell us why he decided to do this, to showcase this. I mean, it's one thing to see vulnerability, but it's usually against gods when we see Superman get his ass kicked. This wasn't against gods, but he was getting his ass beat the entire movie. But I did like him as Superman. I liked him as Clark Kent. I loved how him and Rachel Brosnahan, who plays Lois Lane, I liked her as Lois Lane. She looks the part. One of the biggest problems people had with Amy Adams, who played Lois Lane in Man of Steel and BVS and Justice League, was she didn't look the part from a comic accuracy, right, standpoint. She didn't have the black hair. She didn't always wear purple. I loved Amy Adams as Lois Lane. I mean, she was tough as a reporter. But we got to see Lois Lane, Rachel Brosnahan's portrayal of Lois Lane. And I really liked her as Lois Lane. She's believable as Lois Lane. I love the back and forth that they go when they go up against each other. When Lois is actually interviewing Clark as Superman and interviewing Superman, I did enjoy her as Lois Lane. I loved how they really kind of focused in on her reporter side, right? Which is kind of cool. We did see that with Amy Adams, but we had a lot of context, So we didn't, again, it wasn't a lot, but we saw her. I loved Nicholas Hoult as Lex Luthor. I really did. I loved his adaptation, this new adaptation of Lex Luthor. I mean, diabolical, maniacal, evil. A lot of people with Jesse Eisenberg's portrayal of Lex Luthor in BVS, Batman versus Superman, they didn't like his version, right? They didn't like his tics, right? Almost felt like he was on the spectrum, right? But I liked him. It wasn't, but again, people always say we didn't get the Lex Luthor we want. It's because we didn't get the follow-up movies that we were going to get. Zack Snyder always had a huge, like Lex Luthor was going to play a huge role in Justice League 2. Why? Because remember at the end of Justice League where he escapes from prison, meets with Deathstroke, right? At that point, he was going to form the Legion of Doom. We were going to get the version of Lex Luthor that we know. There was supposed to be some continuation, right? But we never got that. So it's hard to really judge his portrayal of Lex Luthor when we didn't necessarily get to see his maturation into the evil, crazy Lex Luthor that we know. But Nicholas Hoult played him in this movie and did a great job. He was evil. He was bad, really bad. And it was fun to watch. It was really fun to watch. Kind of reminded me of Gene Hackman's portrayal of Lex Luthor in the Christopher Reeves movies. He was just really that evil. It was fun to watch. It was fun to watch Ma and Pa Kent, right? Clark Kent's parents. They were real country. It's one of the things I think a lot of fans have always kind of talked about, how in every adaptation of Superman we've seen, because we know Clark Kent grew up in Kansas, we never get to see his parents with a Midwestern accent. But we got to see it in this movie, and it was really fun. His parents are a bit older. It's more comic accurate because, again, when his parents found him as a baby when he crashed on Earth, they were older. They were like in their 40s. So with him being an adult, it looks like they're in their 60s. So it plays well, right? And it looks good. Now to the superheroes. I loved Mr. Terrific, Eddie Gadegi, fellow Kenyan alum. I loved his portrayal of Mr. Terrific. I really did. He was really cool. I loved the tech. I loved what he brought. I loved that he was badass, not just in his portrayal, but in everything. He's a believable Mr. Terrific. I did not like Hawkgirl. What's her name? Mercer something. I did not like her portrayal of Hawkgirl. I don't remember seeing Hawkgirl scream like a hawk. And these are those things that I'm going to talk about that I didn't, but again, this is not what is it called? This is not a spoiler, but I don't know what it is with James Gunn and certain things. Remember that freaking crazy goat in Thor: Love and Thunder, it was good the first time you heard it, but it just kept going on. It became so irritating. This